This is going to be a little bit more of a lo-fi, rough and ready video, as I just want to get into the crux of the thing everyone's arguing about with regards to the final few laps of the 2021 Formula 1 World Championship finale. I basically just want to lay out the facts as they exist, because a lot of this is arguing over the dense language of the technical regulations and their interpretation. I have some opinions, but hopefully you'll find them balanced enough, even if you disagree. But first, big congratulations to Max Verstappen on winning the 2021 World Championship. He's been a tremendous contender this year, finding incredible speed and racing amazingly hard for every position. And apart from Hungary, every race he actually finished, he finished in the top 2. He took on a 7-time world champion in a team on the performance streak of a lifetime and came out on top. And on balance, he did have a healthy share of bad luck along the way, losing massive chunks of potential points in Azerbaijan, Britain and Hungary in particular, through little to no fault of his own. So to be handed a lucky hand just at the end of Abu Dhabi is nothing I have a problem with. He is a worthy champion, indeed. And speaking of luck, I also don't have a problem with a surprise safety car twist at the end of a final race, changing up the fortunes of the leaving drivers. It is a thing that happens often through the season, it can go either way, and importantly, teams will always be hypothesizing and strategizing for the possibility of a safety car at any point in the race. And as it happened in Abu Dhabi, the safety car worked in a way to benefit Max. That's how it goes. What I want to focus on specifically is the way the race director withdrew the safety car with regards to the regulations, and to do that, we can focus on the protest Mercedes filed after the race as our framework for understanding this. So first, here's what happened. On lap 53 of a 58-lap race, Hamilton was leading Verstappen by about 11 seconds and looked to have the win in hand when Latifi crashed at lap 14, prompting the deployment of the safety car. Now this obviously bunches the field up, reducing the lead Hamilton had maintained over Max. On top of this, Verstappen was able to jump into the pits to scrub soft tyres while Hamilton was still on 39-lap-old hard tyres. The performance deficit between these two tyre sets would have been significant. Now, Mercedes didn't pit Hamilton because losing track position to Verstappen would have been an instant game over, and they couldn't be sure the race would even be restarted. And therein lies one of the problems. There were only 5 laps remaining once the safety car train formed. Would one of the most exciting, epic, enthralling world championships in history really be ending behind a safety car? Surely no one wanted that. And actually the teams and race directors had agreed before the race that it would be a priority to get the race going again should a safety car come late in the race. Another issue was that there were 5 lapped cars between Hamilton in P1 and Verstappen in P2. It had become customary to allow lap cars to overtake the safety car and wind their way to the back of the train so that the cars actually fighting for position were brought together at the restart. But we were running out of time. So race control declared on lap 56 that lapped cars would not be allowed to overtake, in the interest of speeding up the process of getting the race restarted. And at this point, they were still cleaning up the remains of the Latifi accident, and race control don't really like to let the lap cars loose while they're still marshals on track. But on lap 57, the penultimate lap, race control ordered the 5 cars between the leaders, and only the 5 cars between the leaders, to unlap themselves, and then immediately declared the safety car be pitting that lap, setting up one final racing lap. And we know what happened next. Verstappen on his newer softs overtook Hamilton and held him off to take the win and the championship. So Mercedes protested breaches of Article 48.12 of the sporting regulations, so let's have a look at that. This is the article in full, but I'll break down the key points. Firstly, it indicates that the message, lap cars may now overtake, may be sent out, which mandates that all the lapped cars must pass the cars on the leading lap, and the safety car. The cars may then make their way around the circuit and to the back of the safety car train. It also indicates quite clearly that once the lapped car has passed the leader, the safety car will return to the pits at the end of the following lap. The wording of this regulation dictates the safety car is supposed to do one more lap after the lap cars have made their way past. And essentially, these are 2 points of conflict that Mercedes have brought up in their protest. 1, that all lapped cars are supposed to unlap themselves and overtake the leader, and 2, that once the back markers are passed, the safety car is supposed to do one more complete lap, at least. This last bit is basically to ensure they are well out of the way and back in the train when the race restarts. So essentially, the protest makes the point that the proper restart procedures weren't followed and for the classification to be amended. Now I'll skip over Red Bull's defence because it's the Massey explanation and the Stewards' rejection conclusions that are the real point here. So Michael Massey, the race director, says that basically he only used Article 48.12 to get rid of some cars that were in the way of the leaders, but actually 48.13 was the main article invoked here. And the stewards agree that Article 48.13 overrides Article 48.12. So what does this mean? Article 48.13 dictates that once the clerk of the course sends out the message, safety car in this lap, the safety car has to come in and the rest of the cars go into race restart preparation procedure. And this is where it all gets a little bit squiffy in my eyes. So essentially this means that while 48.12 does state clearly there is convention that all lapped cars must unlap leaders and that the safety car must do at least one more lap after that, the stewards say you could basically ignore all the dictats of 48.12 by just throwing the safety car in this lap message. And as soon as you throw that message, apparently none of the rules in 48.12 apply. This is muddy water. Partly because it feels like there's no point in giving a lengthy description to the safe and fair process of how cars are meant to unlap from the train if there's another rule that says, well, the clerk can just bring in the safety cars whenever, regardless of whether the written regulations are followed. And partly because, well, this isn't how races have been run before. Teams and drivers have an expectation of how race procedures work, and they plan and run accordingly. In the space of a few seconds, a handful of cars were told to unlap and drivers were told a restart was about to happen. Something not laid out in the rules. Now, it's also important to point out the stewards point to Article 15.3. And this is a big one, so let's go through it. Article 15 as a whole basically lays out the roles and responsibilities of the main race control officials. And 15.3 maps out the relationship between the clerk of the course and the race director. But essentially, they work in harmony together, with the clerk of the course basically being the person to actually manage the racetrack, like calling safety cars, red flags, and deploying safety vehicles, but under the behest of the race director. So Michael Massey has the final call on everything, but the clerk of the course is the one who actually communicates with all the on-track operations. And that is actually the point of 15.3. It's laying out the key responsibilities of the clerk of the course, but notes that they operate in consultation with the race director, and that the race director has final say and can override the clerk if necessary. But the stewards interpret this article in an interesting way, essentially reading it as the race director shall have overriding authority in the use of the safety car, meaning that basically Massey has carte blanche say over how the safety car is used. This is a bit troubling in general. Not only is this not what the article is meant to be about, again it's just about laying out responsibilities, but declaring that Michael Massey can literally do whatever he wants with the safety car, no matter what the pages and pages of regulations say regarding safety car use, is a dangerous precedent. So, just to be clear, this isn't about being bitter about Lewis losing the title or even safety cars deciding the championship. I do want to reiterate that because basically everything I'm about to say about the proper use of regulations would have put Hamilton in a much more advantageous position, but I can't help that. So following the letter of the regulations, instead of kind of fudging it in the way that he did, the race director had three basic options. 1. Finish the race under the safety car. And I think, if we're all honest with ourselves, were this round 6 of the season and not the championship decider, this race would have almost certainly finished behind the safety car. There would have been no rush to get it restarted. Now the downside of this? A neutralised end to the title deciding finale. But is it up to Massey to have this on his mind? We'll come back to that. 2. Restart the race for one lap, but don't let lap cars pass the safety car. It isn't mandatory to get all the lap cars out of the way, and without that part of the procedure, the race director could easily have restarted the race without blurring the written rules. The downside, again, is we don't get Hamilton and Verstappen together on track. But, sometimes that's just the way things go. Verstappen was able to get on the soft tyres, but he has to pass some back markers. Some might even call this more fair, as Hamilton did have his lead neutralised, but I'm actually not interested in fudging the luck of the draw either. 3. Red flag the race when Latifi crashed. Then everyone gets fresh tyres and we do a 4-lap sprint race to the finish. This puts everyone on an even playing field, and it could have gone either way. The problem with this is there wasn't really a good reason to red flag the race other than setting up a big showdown finale. But seeing as decisions were made to force a big showdown finale anyway, this ends up being kind of the best decision in hindsight. So what is the problem we've got? It is kind of annoying for me that this is all coupled in with a title deciding moment, because I really want to focus on the race direction aspect without it looking like I'm just mad that a title was stolen from anyone, because I don't. Max and Lewis drove the race that was given to them and they both did it brilliantly. Taking the title away from Max now would be horrible. No, I want to focus on race direction in general, because I think we've had very wobbly race control and stewarding this year, and it really has to stop. There have been a lot of calls and decisions and penalties or lack of penalties that are completely inconsistent from one another and have left teams, drivers, and the media completely unclear on what the actual rules are. We need to go into races. Drivers need to fight each other, knowing exactly what the rules are and what happens if they're broken. And I think track limits completely exemplifies this. Instead of the white lines clearly defining the limits of the racetrack, whereby if you go outside the white lines, that's illegal, the officials define different rules for different corners. Maybe a white line, maybe a curb. They change the rules through the weekend, and some corners they don't monitor at all, and you can go as wide as you like. We need to go into 2022 knowing exactly what the rules are under different circumstances, and we don't need the race director to have absolute power over fudging the rules and making up procedures on the fly. And in fact, we don't need the race director to have one mind on what makes a good show. They are there to keep the race to time and to make sure it operates safely and under the rules. In my opinion, the race director shouldn't be a super authority, but operate as part of a team which, importantly, can challenge their decisions and make sure everything works in the way the regulations lay out. That way, everyone knows what's going on. The problem with the race director's decision-making in Abu Dhabi, including that bizarre call to let Hamilton get away with corner cutting, is that it makes Formula 1 look more like a circus than a sport. Are these serious athletes we're watching, or just players in a show? Leave it to Netflix to give Formula 1 the dramatic framing. The race director is here to run a sport.